Yes, my sobriety date is July 16, 2006. Two home groups, technically. One of them is Lake City Young People. The other one is Kitchen Group. And I do a bit of service. Not so much my home group anymore. I'm just too, I don't want to say busy. But I have other commitments that keep me quite busy. And so I just can't commit to that right now. But yeah, so, I related a lot to Aaron's story, and I hope maybe you guys did too. I don't know. It's a classic alcoholic story, but there are some specific details, Aaron, that I haven't heard in many of the people's story. And I was like, hey, me too. Not the swamp story, but the other stuff. I started drinking. I used to think really late in life. I started thinking that because I went to meetings and I heard people tell these stories about how they started drinking when they were like 10 and they were doing all these crazy things and stuff by 14. And I started drinking at 17, 16, I don't know, 17, I think, senior year of high school. And I was saying that at some meeting, lamenting, about how I'm such a loser alcoholic that I started drinking so late in life, and this guy pulled me aside and was like, well, where we live, the legal drinking age is 21. So technically you were earlier than the government would have had you. And I was like, well, okay, fine, But I started drinking in high school and it was super fun. I think it says, I think there's a story in the back of the book, that the person talks about how they wouldn't trade their best days drinking for their worst days sober. And that's not my experience. I had some great times drinking. I've had some really fun times and some pretty terrible days sober. In the beginning, it was those fun times, right? It was like high school parties and just drinking in the park and you're in high school. So what is there to worry about, and it was just, it was fun. A lot of good times doing stupid high school kid stuff, when I finally found my way to Alcoholics Anonymous, throughout the years of being sober, I've had either memories come back or people will say stuff and it'll jog my memory. It'll trigger oh my gosh, yes, I've had that experience, or that reminds me of, and so having been sober for a while, I've had not my blackout memories come back, but I've had these recollections of, even being in high school at drinking parties or, parties and being like, wow, that I did not drink like my classmates, right? From then I can see it, we were playing rock, paper, scissors, and when you're in high school, anything can be a drinking game. And we had, I so vividly recall this, being in this basement in Kenmore. Anyway, and we mixed cheap vodka with water, which is terrible, by the way. Out of this metal, it was bad. It was so bad. And those of you who know me know that I'm incredibly competitive and I do not like to lose. But I had no problem losing, repeatedly. I'm like, oh, I lost. I have to drink, and my friends would drink it, oh, it was so bad, and take a tiny sip, and I would drink it and feign, the terrible taste, but I would just take a giant swig, right? And nobody else was doing that, right? Like that. And I didn't realize this until years into recovery, right? That my reaction to alcohol was different than my classmates in high school, my classmates and teammates in college. They did not react the way that I did to alcohol. And that was honestly one of my biggest first step experiences was being a couple months sober probably and going to a party with my teammates and seeing how they drank and walking into the room and being like, okay, they're going to it's going to be crazy, right? Like a bunch of me, running around. And it wasn't. They were not drinking the way I was, and I asked somebody what's going on? Is something different tonight? Why is it and they're like, no, that was just you. This is how we've always been that. You were the one that was different. You were a maniac, and that's how it was for me, right? It escalated pretty quickly from, being 17, or 17, I think, drinking in the parks and fun games in your friends' basements to, having my friends stage an intervention, with me. And here we are, we're 19 years old, and my 19-year-old roommates are like, we think you have a problem with drinking. And I was like, screw you, I'm 19. You don't know me, And I always laugh when I tell the story because it's just so goofy to picture these 3 19-year-olds sitting in this dorm room, right? And they're very serious, and I'm of course not. I'm nope, and I don't know where they had got this idea. If they saw a movie or a show or someone's mom told them, I don't know where they thought Lupita is a maniac. This needs to stop. I mean, that was clear, but why have an intervention? What a weird thing to do, when you're 19, and. but that's where I got to, right? For me, my drinking escalated, obviously, in those short couple of years tremendously quickly, to the point where people were having interventions. No one wanted to be around me. They were conveniently never around the dorm when I was there. Like my roommate was just always off at her boyfriend's house. And I didn't realize until she told me years later that was on purpose, right? Like that was timed, and I remember at the time they had the intervention and I got new friends because whatever. And I didn't have the time to deal with that. And so I got new friends who didn't care about me as much and just let me do my thing, right? Just did not really care and would let me get drunk, and then we'd drive to Taco Bell and it would just be fun. And I recall a handful of moments in my drinking, really, that like, and in my recovery too, but in my drinking for sure, at least this one of, I had only done alcohol, got sober for a minute, and then did a bunch of weed, and that was it, but I wanted more. Like I just never really had access to more. And there's 2 moments in my recovery where one person offered me something and I was like, no, that's weird. Like, why would I ever say no to something free? That was weird. And another moment where I wanted something more, right? I just needed to pack a bigger punch. And I told my friend who'd been hooking me up with stuff, and he's like, all right, let's go talk to my guy. So we meet at Applebee's, talking to this guy, and like, all right, here's the deal, man. Here's my plan. This is what I want to do. And here's, this guy looks at me, who like, sells drugs professionally, and was like, no, I don't think you need that. And I was like, excuse me? How do you know what I need, right? And like, here's this guy who just could make a ton of money off of me saying no, quite literally saving my life, right, from what it could have been, right? And so there's a few moments like that I don't know how they unfolded the way they did, but I'm grateful for them, right? But they're those are the friends I was keeping at that point. And I was seeing a therapist because I thought something was wrong with me, and I'm just an alcoholic, it turns out. A few other things, but for sure an alcoholic. And I was talking to this therapist, and she was the only person I was honest with about like how much I was drinking and how frequently. And she had mentioned a couple of times that maybe I should look into AA. And eventually I did, right? I go back to my dorm room, and I'm probably drunk. I have, again, vivid recollection of like sitting in the dorm room in this like lawn chair in the dark, watching Sister Act 2, like just sad, right? Although Sister Act 2 is great. Why was I sad? I don't know. Because I'm an alcoholic and I'm lonely inside, right? My world was just imploding, and even though nothing physically looked terrible, like my world was just crumbling in on me. And so I eventually looked up, Alcoholics Anonymous or drinking or getting sober, whatever it was, and there's this survey. I don't know which one it was, but it's a survey of you can take a bunch of questions and here's how to diagnose yourself, because I had a really hard time diagnosing myself. I wanted you to diagnose me. I wanted the computer to diagnose me. I wanted anyone else to take responsibility for this major problem that I was having, and I remember taking the survey, and I probably lied quite a bit because, again, memories have come back since. I'm like, oh my God, I did drink at work. Like, oh God, okay. I remember taking it, and lying a little bit, fibbing, bending the truth a little, taking it by myself. And it gets to the end, and it's like, if you answered yes to 2 or more of these, you might be an alcoholic. And I was like, well, son of a man, this is a trick, right? Like they got me with this one, and I'm still not convinced I'm an alcoholic, right? I'm running around asking my friends, do you think I'm an alcoholic? It's kind of like, Are You My Mother, that book, anyway, like, do you think I'm an alcoholic? Do you think, asking everybody, and they're like, and one of my dear friends, one of the ones who had the intervention, was like, Peta, I've quite literally never wondered that about myself. Like, for what it's worth, I've never had that thought. And I was like, okay. Like, so yes, or, I'm like, I need a more definite answer. Like, that's not going to work for me, and and that's the truth, right? Like, she didn't diagnose me, right? But that is they did not wonder this, right? Like getting sober and having these moments of going to these parties and seeing that these friends at least did not react the way I did to alcohol, right? And not just alcohol, like to life, right? Like they react differently to life than I do sometimes, and so eventually started going to meetings, and one of my dear friends drove me for like my first 6, 8, 9 months. She would not do anything fun on Friday night, but drive me to an AA meeting across town, and we'd go to this meeting. It's a young people meeting. We'd sit there, and then we'd go home, right? And then we'd, do whatever college kids do. And they had invited me. Somehow they knew that I was new, and and they passed around a little meeting schedule, with the phone numbers. And I was moving a while back, and I found that meeting list. I'm like, oh my God, this is a trip. Like, that was my first sponsor, and these are people I know. Like, this is crazy, And so, so that was a trip. But I kept going to that meeting, didn't do anything, just kind of came and went, and eventually they invited me out to get dinner at some diner they went to afterwards. And I started doing that and started getting rides from people in the meeting, and my first opportunity to be of service came when who became my sponsor, was moving. And she's like, what are you doing on Saturday? And I was like, I have literally nothing going on. And she's like, great, we're going to pick you up at whatever time, and you're going to help me move. And I was like, okay, I will be there, right? And that was the first opportunity that I had to not sit and hate my sober life and sit and think about how I'm such a loser and this is stupid and I can't believe, I've just ruined it all, and I didn't know anybody, and, terrified of strangers and just terrified of not knowing what I'm doing. And but here I was able to move boxes from one part of the complex to another, right? Like, okay, these boxes need to go over there. And I'm like, I can do that, right? Like, I just moving boxes. Like, that's what I did all day. I was exhausted and went home, and I'm sure just crashed, and and that was, I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, my first introduction to actually thinking about other people, right? To service, right? Not in the capacity of, I had a home group and I had a service commitment, but I did something for somebody else. And for that day, did not obsess about myself all day long, and I, I went to college in California, and I grew up here. So I was going back and forth, summer, winter kind of thing, or winter breaks and summer breaks. And it was really easy to still stay isolated, to not get connected. I have friends in Seattle. I don't need your phone numbers. I don't need to do fellowship. I am really connected in Seattle. I'm there for like a week out of the year, right? And then I'm living in California for school. And then I'm like, telling people in Seattle, oh, no, I'm really connected down in California. Like, I'm good. I'm fine. Thank you, though, for your invite to fellowship. I appreciate it, but I'm good, and it gets to the point where it's really lonely when you keep doing that and you have no one around you, and what I learned pretty quickly then is that, for me, service through, it was YPA initially, young people in AA was the best way to not be so lonely all the time. I had these commitments, right? Like, whether they wanted to be there or not, which, they did, because they were nice people. Like, I had to be there. My job is to do this thing. Like, you have to let me be here. I have to set up the chairs. I have to make the coffee. I have to do this, and so I had a reason, a purpose to be there, and it made my anxiety lessen just a little bit so that I could feel a little bit more comfortable and let you talk to me, right? And so I got into service, and next thing I know, I have these commitments at this YPA, this committee in Stockton, and we're doing this stuff, and I'm starting to do the steps with my sponsor, and if you can imagine it, I was pretty obstinate and quite argumentative back then. It's lessened over the years, but I still can be. And I recall very distinctly, working on the steps with my sponsor and arguing with her quite a bit about step 2. We're sitting outside this Mexican restaurant, talking about step 2, and I just did not think that I think this is not going to work for me, Liz. Like, this is not real. I don't think I can be restored to sanity. I don't recall if my issue was that I don't think I ever was sane or that I was insane. I don't remember where I had the hang up, but I was being so literal and so nitpicky and so, intellectualizing this one sentence, that I was like, I don't think this is going to be true. I don't think this is going to work for me, and she had an immense amount of patience with me, and kind of let me spin my wheels for a little bit. And I was like, okay, we're done now. And she said, all right, well, do you think that the people we know from our meeting, do you think that maybe this has worked for them? Do you think that, like, step 2, right? Do you think that maybe they've been restored to sanity? Like, the people we see, this person, that, but like, do they seem insane to you, right? And I was like, no, they seem pretty not sane. And she's like, okay. Or wait, they seem pretty not insane. They seem pretty sane. Some of them, though. And she's like, okay, well, so do you think this has worked for them? And I was like, yeah, I will concede that. Sure, I'll play your game. And she's like, okay, great. Then we're moving on to step 3, right? Like, we're just going to pray, and then we're going to start writing some stuff, and that was the way I ran through the steps the first time, was to not sit and like think about it and like, because I didn't need that, right? And if that's what you need, that's great. But I, at that time, could not sit and think and just pick things apart and try to look up the definitions of words and what does this mean? Like, that will just make me crazy, right? And she knew that, right? I think because she's a lot like me, and she had seen my craziness, and just knew, like, you just need to do stuff. Whether you believe it'll work for you or not, whether you think it's working for you or not, whether you like doing it, none of that matters, right? Lupita, you need to be doing things. Like, you are a crazy person. Let's just start writing a full step, And then I was confused by the 4 step. Like, I don't get it. And she's like, read the 12 and 12. Like, it's pretty simple in the big book. Like, I don't know how I didn't get it, but I was so confused and I could not start and was just, spinning out about that, and then I had this, getting sober at 20 and only drinking for 3 years. My 4th step was pretty short, and I would hear people in meetings talk about the 4th step is so scary and it's so long, and mine is 14 pages and mine is 72. Mine's 3 notebooks. Mine was 7 hours with my sponsor and they fell asleep. And I was like, mine is like 1 page. Like, have I done it wrong? Like, am I, failing at, at AA? And am I, worst of all, am I gonna drink? Like, I'm terrified of this, and so I started making things up, or not really. I didn't make things up. I really dug the bottom of the barrel. Like, I was like, in 1st grade, like, this teacher took away my pencil topper. Like, I was like really trying to, scrape the barrel to get everything on there to be thorough, and I'm in a panic. And I call my sponsor, who got sober when she was 16, and I was like, Liz, I don't think I did it well enough, and I think that maybe, and the thing that she told me, I've remembered my whole recovery was that, like, it really doesn't matter, like, if you're being honest and thorough and you're being sincere about it, it'll be okay. If you've forgotten stuff, it'll be okay. If your 4th step is only 2 pages, it'll be okay, right? And it has been. I didn't drink since I did the 4th step. I didn't drink since I got sober, but and I probably left stuff off the 4th step, but the point of the 4th step for me was not, to write like an exhaustive list of every wrong that had been done me or that I had done others. It was, like we heard today, it was, to see the behaviors, right? And to see like the trends and stuff, and to see how I had set the ball rolling and things, right? Because for me, that's what I can control. And that's what the behavior that I can amend, right? Like, that's what I can change to live a different life, right? And whether I'm living a different life or not, I can at least feel differently about things, right? I can react differently to things. I had, I thought some very justified amends, not amends, resentments, and they kind of probably were, but they're still like, okay, but where did you set the ball rolling, right? And I didn't have anything incredibly traumatic. There are some things that are not your fault, but there's this one incident that I'm like, okay, this thing, and someone said I could have that, and someone else took it, and I was just, all upset about whatever. And my sponsor, like, not just in the 4th step, but like for the next like 10 years, would ask me, like, okay, but where did you set the ball rolling? Like, how did you start this? Like, how did you step on their toes? And they reacted, and when I can stop and look at that, I can see, that invariably I did something, right? Or I had an expectation, right? Or there's something, some small role that I have played, to get where we are, and when I can accept that, I can say, all right, well, yep, that's my bad, right? And I can get over it, or I can write about it more. I can pray about it, or I can try to go make an amends about my behavior, and I had, the great, the great fortune to make a handful of amends, all of my amends, right? And, what they don't tell you when you make amends is that sometimes people like won't be like happy about it, and they're not all gonna be like, good for you, you're sober, keep doing it, right? Like, made an amends to my brother, and we went to his college graduation, and he and I went on a walk, and I was like, hey, I need to, do this thing and make him the amends. And he's 6 years younger than me, and I'm like so proud of myself. My first brother and I, we did it via Skype, like 15 years ago, right? When Skype was like not a thing, and so he was halfway around the world serving in the military. So I get up at like 3 a.m. to make his amends, and I'm like, okay, what's a good time for you? And I'm like ready on Skype, and he's like, yeah, it's cool, thanks. I'm like, see ya, I'm like, perfect. They'll all be smooth sailing. That was great, and I make this amends to my youngest brother, and I'm talking to him, and I'm like, hey man, and I do this stuff, and I explain why we're doing it and all that, and and he was honest with me, which I did not appreciate at the time, but I appreciate now. And he looked at me and he was like, yeah, you were a terrible sister. Yeah. And I was like, you're not supposed to say that. That's not how this is supposed to go. You're supposed to be like, oh, you're so great, Lupita. Like, thank you. I didn't say anything. I kept that on the side, and I was like, just shocked by that. And I was like, what? And he's like, I had a really tough time in high school, a really, really tough time. And you were such a bad influence. Mom wouldn't let me call you. Mom said I couldn't talk to you. And I just needed my sister. And I couldn't call you. And you weren't there. And you came home and just, was never there. And I was like, oh, okay, like this whole time I thought I'm away at college, I'm drinking, no problem. I occasionally call my parents for like my health insurance information, which must be terrifying as a parent to just get a phone call either asking for money or asking for insurance information, and then be like, thanks, see you, bye, and like that's it, and the whole time I'm like, oh, I'm in college, I'm not affecting it, it's fine, and here's my little brother who just wanted his sister, right? Like that was what he needed. He needed a friend who he could trust, and he didn't have me, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so much bigger than I realized, right? I thought this was just me and I need to clean it. Like I could see the impact that I was having on other people, and I had no clue, up to that point of what that was and what that really looked like and what that really meant for other people, and I made a similar, amends to my mom, and she said the same sort of thing. I just wanted my daughter, she don't get me wrong. She had an exhaustive spreadsheet of how much money I owed her. But she also was like, I just wanted, to take me to lunch every now and then, to call me on my birthday and come by my work and just bring me a card and say, can you go to lunch, I was crying about my mom. So I made the amends with her. She and I had a tumultuous relationship, but she died when I had 9.5 years sober, not quite 10. And what I had gotten to do to that point, my sponsors, man, do what they say, but it's annoying sometimes. My sponsor had me early in recovery. It wasn't even amends that I realized, but it was when I was in California, I'd have to call my mom every Sunday or whatever and not hang up until she wanted to hang up. I couldn't just be like, okay, I gotta go, and just like end it in 5 minutes, right? I had to stay on the phone until she was done, which could be a long time. And but through doing that, right, and then graduating college and moving back to Seattle and going over there every Sunday for dinner with her and my dad, and my brothers if they were home, I built this relationship. I was a daughter. I showed up, and I still see my dad every Sunday for dinner when he's in town and when I'm free. Like we do Sunday dinner every time, and it's fucking annoying sometimes. But I'm like, nope, driving to Mill Creek, gonna see my dad for dinner. We're gonna not talk and watch sports. That's what we're gonna do, and that's our thing. And I love it, because it also works for me. And we both fall asleep on the couch, and then I take a picture of him and I send it to my brother. But through doing all that stuff, I got to have this amazing relationship with my mom. It wasn't amazing, but it was better than it was before, right? And I got to be there for her when she was, dying, right? And when she got real sick, and I could show up for her, and she was really excited for me to get my 10-year coin, and she wanted to come to my meeting, and she's like, is there like a special thing? Is there a whole event? I'm like, no, Mom, it's just a Tuesday night. I'm like, me, and they give me a coin, and that's it, right? It's pretty chill. She's like, well, I'd like to come. And I was like, okay, Mom, weirdo, and but she was just so excited that I was sober, right? And she was so proud, and I think she had seen what I was doing, and that's the example I got to give. And obviously she died before I could, get my coin. But I've seen, my same thing. My brother may or may not, one of my brothers may or may not have alcohol related issues, and he's seen me be sober, and he's called me real drunk one night, and like panicked, like he was having a real bad night. And one of his buddies was over there. I don't know. Someone came to check on him because it was a real bad night. And I could hear him talking to his buddy. My sister is sober. She's been sober for so long. I'm so proud of her. I'm like, okay, Paco, I know. You just need to go to sleep, man. Like, take your shoes off, put them in bed. Like, you know what I mean? But he knew to call me when he was having this complete freak out, probably blacked out because we never talked about it again. But he knew, like something in him knew. Lupita is different now, and she's sober, and she does these meetings, and like it's different, and I've been able to be that person. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. It's the program, right? Like that I've shown up to work, and I'm not a secret about, my history, when appropriate, and people ask me at work, like, hey, meetings, what are they about? What do you do? How do I find one? Like things like that, and just a couple days ago, I had a conversation with a coworker about that, and we're Googling Al-Anon meetings for her to find, and like, this is what I get to do today, is that it's nothing unique to me. It's nothing, I didn't do the steps some perfect special way or have the perfect number of sponsees or do all the pieces in the right way. I didn't do any of that. I just showed up and begrudgingly did a bunch of stuff that people told me to do, and I complained a lot, in the early recovery, and still sometimes. But I still got the stuff, not the stuff. I still got the being okayness, right? And the stuff has come and gone or whatever, but that I can go through my life with a little bit of peace, right? My emotional, the amplitude of my emotions has lessened, right? Like they're less dramatic, right? I'm not popping off at people all the time, right? I have a little pause before, I send that text or I reply to that email or I answer the phone. I don't have to respond to everyone, and I have this ability to just show up for others, and it's not even an ability, to be honest with you. I was talking to somebody just yesterday about this, or 2 days ago about this, that it's a privilege, certainly, but it's like my duty, right? Like this is my job in life, is to like just show up for other people, and when I can go to work or go to a meeting or do service stuff or do whatever it is and think, okay, my job is just to give of myself in whatever this other person or this group or this meeting needs. That's my job. Period. Right? Like then I'm okay. Right? And I'm not constantly trying to manage and control what's happening in the room and what's this. I'm not getting all cut up in like what it is or what it needs to be or how it's going. I can just be, and that's what I had always been trying to find my whole life, and I've always missed the mark on that consistently, and now I have, a solution, which is a little bit of self-sacrifice and thinking of others and a little prayer, meditation, whatever, and I get to do some really cool stuff, with some pretty awesome people. And sometimes it's annoying stuff with not so awesome people, but I still get to show up and be present, right? And I get to just go through life not feeling like my skin is on fire, and like I need something to fix it, I was at, right before this, I went to an anniversary meeting up in Malley Terrace for a Spanish-speaking group, and I didn't entirely know what was going on. I don't speak Spanish fluently, and there's speakers, and I saw a couple people that I knew, and so we're just chatting, and I'm always impressed with the level of, I don't know, with how they welcome people, right? Like at least the guy that I'm talking to, he's speaking to me in English. I could understand his Spanish a little bit, but he's like, "Do you need the interpreter?" I'm like, "There's no one here, right? It's just me, I'm good, right?" He's like getting me the stuff, and he's getting me water. And do you need this and do that? I'm like, "No, man, I'm good, right?" And they're doing that for everybody. It's not just unique to me, right? But I think about that, and I think, okay, here are these people. Like I don't speak the language, I'm standing up, we're saying the Serenity Prayer, and I can just feel the room, and everyone's saying the Serenity Prayer, and I'm like, okay, I'm okay, right? Like we're okay, and I bring, I guess, that up because I think that so often I get caught up in like what I'm doing and I'm a big deal, just like in life, I think I'm a big deal, and I do all these things and I'm so this and that, whatever, right? And I forget like the point of meetings. Just again, my purpose in life is just to be of service to someone else, and I was telling Courtney earlier today, I got a chance to talk to a gal who had just a couple days sober earlier this week, and I forget like the innocent, like naive questions they asked, like, and I'm so happy about it, right? I'm like, yeah, man, here's my number, right? And she texted me the next day and was like, everything's terrible. What do I do? I'm like, yeah, everything is terrible. That's cool. I'm going to meetings tonight. You want to meet me there? And she did, right? And we got our big book that first night, and like those moments are the ones that I go home and I'm like, man, like, okay, like I got to help somebody, right? Like maybe she stays sober, maybe she doesn't, I don't know. But like I got to show up for someone else and just be nice. And just be kind and be welcoming, right? And maybe that'll make a difference. Maybe it won't, but maybe it will, right? And I thought about that at this anniversary, meeting where they're just welcoming people, right? And just passing out food and just happy to see people, whether they know you or not, whether you understand what's going on or not. They're just like, "What's up?" And I don't know. And I realized how I'm not that way sometimes, and I can get so caught up in myself and like the meeting has to be this way and you have to do it that, and like I like the structure and rigidity, and that's the stuff that gets me really tightly wound inside, and when I can let go of all of that, I'm okay, right? I'm okay inside, and I still have attacks of alcoholism, and some friends in the room have seen them, and or heard about them, and they're not always pretty, but I have enough people around me today to be like, oh, that's just alcoholism. You're fine. It'll get different. Just maybe don't act out or do. That'll be fine too, right? You can live through that. And I have people around me that just, are these guideposts, these bumpers, right? As my bowling ball's rolling down the lane, that just like, okay, maybe over here, maybe over there, and And I've never been so lost that I felt the need to just go kill myself, right? And that's tremendously cool, right? That I just am just okay most of the time, And so, yeah, that's it from me. I am super happy to be here. Thank you, Austria, for asking me out here. It's weird when we serve with people, you don't know their stories. Like I've done that with many people. I'm like, oh yeah, I've known you for like 10 years, but I don't know anything about you. Are you an alcoholic even? I don't know anything about you. You clean up so good. You can't be like me, And we are, right? We are a lot like each other, right? Anyway, so it's always good to be asked to come anywhere. So I appreciate you asking me to come out, and that's all I have. Thank you.